what's up out there, everybody? Thank you guys as always for stopping by the channel. This is my review of Let Him Go, starring Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. It's based on the novel of the same name from Larry Watson, and it's written and directed by Thomas Bezucha. So let's get into this dramatic thriller to see what this story and Lane and Costner in the leads end up delivering.
Don't start what you can't finish.
The story in this one looks to be set in the mid to late 1960s. It centers on a retired sheriff and his wife, played by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. They're still grieving over the accidental death of their son, but they must also deal with their daughter-in-law taking their only grandchild off to live with this violent family that lives in the rural Dakotas. And of course, Lane and Costner aren't going to allow their grandchild to be in harm's way, so they venture off from their quiet Montana home to find him and bring him back home. Now, it should be of no surprise to people familiar with me that I haven't read this book, so I wasn't sure what this movie would deliver in terms of tone. I didn't know if it was going to be more of a dramatic themed story focusing on the emotional beats, or if it'd be more of a charged thriller with Costner and Lane doing some killing to get their grandson back. Either one of those sounded good, and it turns out the movie delivers a bit of both, and I really did enjoy it. So let's get into the positives. And I think you must start with Diane Lane and Kevin Costner and the massive impact that they do leave on this movie. Lane and Costner are both veterans in the game of acting, and their subtle timing and just playing off one another was very natural. It was just what this movie needed, I think, to be able to invest in this story and actually care where it goes, that a connection to this older couple is a must, and they both deliver performances that capture them as a longtime husband and wife who've been through life together. Now, for me, Diane Lane was the true star of this film. I think she brought an authenticity to her character that made her extremely endearing. She's strong, she's an honest woman with values that, despite her stubbornness, you can really understand and get behind. I think Lane delivers that maternal instinct and determination with ease, and it all works perfectly for the needs of driving this plotline forward. Kevin Costner was admittedly a version of Costner that we've seen on screen before. Here he kind of reminded me of a worn-out, retired version of his character from The Highwayman, but it still worked for the needs of the movie. I certainly don't think he mailed it in. He's just played different versions of this role before, so naturally there's going to be some familiarities, but regardless, Kevin Costner's a pro, he was solid, and he had a great natural chemistry with Lane, like I mentioned earlier. I think another positive was certainly the plotline overall. Like I mentioned, I wasn't sure what this movie would deliver in terms of tone. The story here, though, was very grounded. It felt realistic. There was a level of continual unpredictability as well that I think really did keep the intrigue at high levels. I mean, Costner and Lane are up there in years and a seemingly peaceful couple, so naturally as they venture off into the uncharted countryside to look for their grandson, a natural level of uneasiness is set in place. This young boy is living with a family that is deeply rooted in their area. They live way off the grid, they are very high strung, and just much more comfortable with violence than Lane and Kevin Costner are, so the result, for me at least, was compelling to see where things would ultimately go. I also really enjoyed the performances. I felt the cast overall were perfect for their roles. Leslie Manville was just emotionally charged in the role as the matriarch of the Wee Boy family. She was the polar opposite of Lane's character. Jeffrey Donovan, I think, is always perfect in these subtly sleazy roles, and his collection of scenes, for me, were the true bright spots in this one. He's confident, he's arrogant, and he was a true wild card, which I thought all were great additions to this story. Now for some of the drawbacks. I didn't necessarily have any major gripes with this film. I mean, it's a slow burn that does continually elevate, but at the same time it felt like it ran a little bit longer than it needed to. I think some of the middle act could have been tidied up a little bit to keep the pace moving a little bit more swifter. I don't think the film wastes minutes, but some of the silent imagery and the lingering pans I think could have been cleaned up a bit. Because the runtime approaches 2 hours, I think maybe 10 to 15 minutes could have been trimmed out. It would have really kept the engagement level up and the pace moving. I think this story gets to a point where the climax should naturally kick in, but it continues on a little bit longer, which for me did hinder some of the intensity. And without getting into spoilers, I also felt the third act tried to do a little bit too much. I think it elevates the suspense and tension a little higher than it needed to. It resulted in a tone that didn't necessarily fit the rest of the story. The movie leading up to this finale felt like a gritty drama that focused on human emotion, and when the film starts to wrap things up, it does feel a little bit too theatrical. However, I gotta admit, it does provide excitement and energy to close things out on a high note, so it's up to personal taste, I suppose. Overall, however, I thought this was a solid flick. I enjoyed it. It was great to see Diane Lane carrying a movie on her shoulders, and Let Him Go is going to get 80% on the meter. It's a good movie, but not necessarily a great one. I think with this focus being on the emotion, that it could have really used Costner and Lane a little bit more than it did in terms of just ripping at the hearts of the viewer, but still though, it's certainly worth a watch. Now for today's My Silver Screen recommendations, I have selected some films from those in this cast, first being probably, yes, one of my favorite Kevin Costner flicks, that being The Bodyguard. It's 90s melodrama at its finest. Next would be one of my favorite Diane Lane movies, that would be Murder at 1600, where she stars alongside Wesley Snipes. And finally, I had to select Man of Steel, where Kevin Costner and Diane Lane teamed up to play the Kents. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk movies with you guys. Share it with your friends, and without question, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can never miss a video. Here are some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them. All my social media links and the link to our official website are down in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.